Welcome to another Discover Trempealeau County show. We're in Whitehall today. We've got a very interesting program and a very interesting gentleman that we'll be interviewing. His name is Joe Kokott. He's at Gundersen Tri-County Care Center here in Whitehall. He served in the Korean War. He was wounded a couple of times, spent 5 months in the hospital, and in Japan, and we're going to be talking to him. We want a little background of your life. Where were you born and raised, Joe?
I was born in Trout Run Valley, town of Arcadia, in 1930. I lived there most of my life until I entered the Army. Went to local Arcadia schools, including high school. And
how about the grade school? Did you have a country grade school?
I went to Cortland School, country school, for 5 years, and then I went to St. Stanislaus Pro-Hill School for 4 years. 3 years, rather. And,
Is your farm, is that still in the family in Trout Run?
A neighbor bought it. Quentin Brzezinski owns the farm now. And my folks retired to town, and I joined the Army.
So when did you join the Army? Was that right after you got out of high school, or?
I was almost 21 years old. And I joined in 1951. And
this was during the Korean War was going.
Yep. And then where
did you take your basic training?
I took my basic training in Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. In those days, the military sent all the enlisted men that joined the Army to Hawaii for basic. And then after basic, we went right straight to Korea. Now,
didn't you take any advanced training in anything like?
We were supposed to get 8 weeks of advanced training in Japan, but the American Army in Korea had suffered so many losses that they threw us in there to fill the gap.
Oh, so you went right directly from basic training, which is maybe a couple months or something like that.
We had one stop on the way to Japan. We stopped in Guam and picked up a graves registration unit that was working for the Japanese government on Iwo Jima.
So this was a graves unit that was Japanese?
I mean, it was American, but they were working for the Japanese government.
Okay.
And we were just in Guam overnight. Next morning, we were at sea again.
And where were they doing the grave? Was that in Korea? Were they going to Korea then, this grave unit?
After we picked them up, they were going to Korea, yeah. But up to that time, they were on Iwo Jima, looking at the Japanese dead from World War II. And they said that there were so many thousands of Japanese entombed on Iwo, and with the volcanic ash and soil, they were perfectly preserved. It's just like they had died yesterday, you know. And
that was a terrible battle there at Iwo Jima. Mount Shirabashi, I remember a fellow that fought in that battle told me that they just bombed it with planes. They shot their artillery from their ships. They thought they had everything under control, and they had all kinds of caves in the Mount Shirabashi. And they didn't open up fire until everybody got on the beach.
Yep. And they were looking down on those poor Marines because they were on Mount Shirabashi. And the death toll among the Marines was terrible. I believe there was over 5,000 Marines killed on Iwo. But they finally took it. But the last 2 Japanese surrendered on Iwo Jima in 1951. Now, where did they get their drinking water? I don't know, because Iwo has no national water. I imagine they stole it from the Air Force, because we had air bases on Iwo, you know. In fact, I think we should have kept that island as a memorial to those Marines. It was worthless, you know, to us or the Japanese, really, except as an Air Force base.
Well, they had that Air Force going before they got done fighting in Iwo Jima, if my memory serves me correctly.
Planes were landing, yeah. Shot up B-29s that were bombing Japan. They made emergency stops at Iwo. Fighter planes That put them right in the range of the Japanese home islands very nicely. P-51s and those kind. Anyway.
Well, let me ask you this. How was your basic training in Japan? What kind of weather you see you were in Hawaii. What kind of weather conditions are over there at the time you had?
Beautiful. It rained every day, but the sun came out. You barely got your poncho unwrapped, and you were dry again. And but Japan was muggy and hot, but we were only in Japan for a few days. Then they flew us to Korea.
And you were you in the infantry then?
I was in the infantry. That was my first tour, yes. And on the plane, on the way to Korea, I was assigned to the 25th Infantry Division, and en route, they reassigned me to the 1st Cavalry Division. And
what town did you come into when you arrived?
We landed at Kimpo Airfield on the outskirts of Seoul. Now, at this point, there was still some fighting for Seoul, the capital. And there's a few Chinese stragglers left over because the town was officially captured months before,
Was this after they came across the Yalu River?
Yeah.
Americans pushed all the way to the Yalu River, which separated China and Korea. So this was after that when they pushed them back.
They crossed the Yalu River, American troops, which they shouldn't have did. That's kind of a secret. But I talked to guys that were 13 miles inside of Manchuria. And that's what caused the Chinese to enter the war, in my opinion, So anyway, they entered the war, overwhelmed the Marines, and drove all the way to the 38th parallel again, captured Seoul, and their supply lines, Chinese had awful poor supply lines, They couldn't keep up with the supplies for the troops. And Americans recaptured Seoul, drove the Chinese out. Now that's when I entered the picture. I arrived in Korea in early July of 1951. And at that point, the war was stagnant. You couldn't find the Chinese to shoot at. No way, they just disappeared. But they all drifted way north to the Yalu River and resupplied themselves, got reorganized, replacement troops and all that other stuff. We stood unpatrolled, 50 miles ahead of the main line. Didn't hear a shot fired.
Now, let me ask you about these. You went on patrols, you said.
Yep.
Was that a large group of people or just a small group of people?
Size patrols. They can range from a squad to a company to a battalion. All depends on the circumstances.
A squad is about how many? And a company is how many?
A squad was 9-10 men roughly. There's a radio man in there and that. And a company was about 220. And a battalion, of course, was 4 companies. So that was probably 800, 900 men. Anyway, if we were looking for trouble, we sent out a company-sized patrol. Couldn't find no Chinese to shoot at. They made themselves awful scarce. And this went on for about a month and a half. Anyway, we'd go out on those patrols, look for the Chinese, couldn't find them, come back to to base. They'd call those milk runs, No shots were fired, nothing. And one day in August, we were 7 miles ahead of the main line, and there were strange noises at night. And our machine guns were firing, and generally something was afoot, So comes the dawn. They brought us breakfast chow, on trucks up to our base there. Half the company was lined up for chow, the other half was on guard. And all of a sudden, the Chinese fired into us. The guys lined up for the chow. Well, they killed one man and wounded, I think, 12 or 13. And, of course, they fought them off, and then the fight lasted all day. Chinese would blasting us on that hill, and, well, we said at least they're back, you know. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the word came down, get the hell out of there. So we did. We pulled back. And retreating to our own lines, the Thailanders, United Nations Force, shot at us and sprayed the hell out of us. And by the time the officers got the shooting stopped, we had a couple more wounded men. And that night, we were on the main line now. The Chinese probed us. There was a brisk firefight. And in the morning, we went down to take stock of how many dead Chinese we could find. Well, there were several. And after that, every patrol we went on, we got fired on. They were back in force. And then one night, it was my squad's turn to sit on the outpost, which is a listening post ahead of the line, you know. And we were there, and it was just a radio man and 9 men. Okay.
Now, how far away from your main unit was this?
That was about 2 miles. And then turn around. It was a monsoon season, so there was heavy rain clouds, you know. And they played searchlights against those rain clouds to kind of light up the area so they could see, you know. And along about midnight, the assistant squad leader jabbed me in the ribs and he said, "They're coming." Sure as hell, there was three shadowy figures advancing toward us. And he said,
How do you feel about that time?
I wasn't too happy. Anyway.
Must be total fear.
Anyway, the squad leader said, wait. When they got just short of grenade throwing range, he said, "Now!" And we opened up. We killed all 3 of them right on the spot. And then our squad leader, who was a guy from Eagle River, Wisconsin, he crawled over to us to see what the hell was going on, you know. And one of our own men shot him 3 times. And it was just like a miracle. Every shot grazed his rib cage. You know, otherwise you could have killed him. But we got all organized. In the meantime, they called us to the main line, "Get the hell out of there." So we retreated back to the main line. Hollered like hell so our machine gunners wouldn't kill us. And that hill, that was Hill 216. That hill was fought over so many times that you walked on the ground in there and it was just sponge, you know. There was all them dead bodies buried just under the surface. Stunk pretty good, too. And
how big a hill was that? Was it like a mountain or something?
No, 216, that was the meters. 216 meters high. And, well, they crawled over that hill all summer after that. And
did they have any support from the Air Force during these battles?
Oh, yes. In the daytime they had, but not at night, you know. Daytime they napalmed and bombed the living hell out of everything, rocketed it. And napalm is a horrible weapon. When they would drop napalm across the valley, you could feel the heat where we were, and that was about a couple of miles away. And burned up all the oxygen, you know. Anyway.
Well, for this night fighting, did you have glasses, some type of glasses where you could see at night?
We had carbine sights that you could see at night through them, you know. But they didn't use them too much. Because, you know, night fighting, we were mostly in a stationary position, and the Chinese were attacking us, you know. So throw a searchlight against the cloud and you can see good, you know. And, okay, it comes September. We had a good line built up for the winter in the valley, a big wide valley. And there was a railroad running through there. We had railroad ties for bunker roofs, and we were set for the winter in good shape. Some general didn't like our position there. He said we'd be much better off on that ridge up there. So we moved our nice, safe, secure line and took that ridge. Now that's where I got wounded, was on that bloody ridge. The 5th Cavalry attacked it first, and they said there was nothing but Chinese up there. And they failed. The 7th Cavalry took their turn, and they failed. Then it was the 8th turn, my regiment. So we went up there. And the hill number was 418, pretty high hill. And it was absolutely vertical. You crawled hand over hand up anything you could grab a hold of, brush or anything to get up there. We finally got on top of that hill, and there was the first line of Chinese trenches. We overran those with a lot of casualties. Then there was a second line, which was much more sturdy, big heavy bunkers and that. We attacked that second line, and there was a big bunker there, and we were getting a lot of fire from it. And that's the place where I got hit with that hand grenade. And we had a Portuguese immigrant from Chicago, Manuel Sousa. And he was fairly close to that trench, and he got a hold of a satchel charge, which is an explosive charge in a bag. And he threw that satchel charge, and he landed into the bunker. When that thing went off, there was logs, dirt, ground, bodies, body parts flying in the air. And the Chinese, he got a hold of a BAR someplace, and he sprayed that trench with fire, killed 22 Chinese they credited him with. They put him in for the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest military honor. But he didn't get it. I don't know why. And he gave him a Silver Star instead, the fourth highest. So the medic patched me up. He said, if you can walk, he said, get the hell out of here. So I scrounged around, found a rifle, and incidentally, my assistant BAR man picked up the automatic rifle, and he ran about, 10, 12 feet, and he was shot through the chest and killed instantly. So anyway, we went down the hill. There was as many Chinese behind us as there was ahead of us. And we were all pretty well armed. Got to the bottom of the hill, that's a vertical hill, and there was a Greek jeep down there. Greeks are part of the United Nations. And he gave us a ride to a MASH hospital. There was me and my platoon leader, lieutenant, and he was wounded horribly in the chest. Every breath he took, there was a big bubble of blood, And we got to that MASH hospital. They patched us up.
You said MASH hospital.
Mobile Surgical Army Hospital. That's like the TV program, only it was, trust me, it was not like the TV program. Anyway, there was a tent full of Chinese prisoners at that MASH hospital. And 2 MPs guarding them. And I said, they had machine guns. And I said, Lord, if one of those Chinese make a break and they open up with those machine guns, we're all going to be clipped. Well, luckily they were docile and they were happy to be out of war, I think. Next morning, they loaded me on a train, and sent me to the Swedish hospital in Busan. Now, the Swedes sent medical units to Korea. They didn't send fighting men. So they operated on me in a Swedish hospital. Incidentally, that was my first experience with sodium pentothal. That knocks you out before surgery. Such a blonde Swedish nurse, very well built, I might add, said, now you count with me. I said, 1, I never hit 2. The lights were out. Woke up next morning at 9 o'clock. Cot, all I was sleeping on was all bloody. They fed me breakfast, loaded me on a plane, flew me to Japan, to the Air Force Hospital. And I spent 5 weeks in that Air Force Hospital. But then, when I was recuperated, right back to the meat grinder I went, back to Korea. And by that time, the Chinese were pretty frisky. I mean, they were back in full strength, and we had firefights every day practically. We went out on the patrol to see if we could learn something. Well, we got fired the minute we left our line. And our lieutenant, by the way, he was a replacement. He was from Puerto Rico. His name was Korea. Korea was in Korea. His name was spelled Curea. Puerto Rican, a hell of a nice guy. So we went on that patrol. We snuck down into the valley. There was only a squad of us.
How many people?
9 people, the radio man. 10 maybe altogether. 11 with the lieutenant. And we were sneaking and peeking. This was a sneaking and peeking patrol. You're not looking for trouble, but you just want to find out what you can about the enemy. So we looked at the Chinese there. They were digging bunkers. Our lieutenant said, "We've seen enough. Let's go back." I said, "That's a man after my own heart. So we get the hell out of there, you know." So we went back to the line. Next day, another squad's turn was to sneak down there and look at that. And then we kind of, well, I don't know, it was quiet, so we kind of, we got complacent. Then the Chinese hit us that one night. Oh, Lord, did they ever hit us. Anyway, there was a horrible firefight out of that. They broke to our perimeter. And they even got into the platoon CP, which is a command post. And the lieutenant in there had a .45 automatic pistol, and the platoon sergeant had a Thompson submachine gun. Well, between the two of them, they killed 7 Chinese right in the entrance to that bunker. And then they were all over us. My buddy and I, he had a VAR and I had a shotgun. We stood back to back. We shot at anything and everything that moved because they were all over us. And finally we repelled them. And next morning we were up to our ears in dead Chinese, They were all over the place. So we didn't want to bury them all. It was November, kind of frozen already. So they made a deal with the Chinese to pick up your dead and wounded, which we had a gentleman's agreement with them, They'd let us pick our wounded up or dead, and we let them. So here comes a whole Chinese outfit up the hill. They started carting off the bodies and their wounded, and they forgot one guy. And he was a kid, and he was in one of our trenches, and he froze to death during the night. He was badly wounded, and there was a big icicle of blood from him to the ground, It was kind of tragic. He looked all of 15 years old, maybe. So they gathered up their wounded and dead and hauled them off. The next night, our officers decided we got to run a patrol down there. Oh, Lord, was that a disaster. GI at night is a very noisy person. Chinese would slip through in the night, you never heard them. A GI, groaning and moaning and banging ammunition boxes together. Racket, Well, we went out there. Oh, Lord. They shot the hell out of us. And we bugged out, which is every man for himself, and got back to our line. And we decided not to bother the Chinese for a while, So, about 3-4 nights later, they said, "Kokott, take your squad and go on the outpost." Oh, boy. So we went out there. I had squad of men, a radio man, a machine gunner. We took a machine gun along on that one. And that was about it. About 9 or 10 men, as usual. Okay. Here comes the night. It gets dark. Here come the searchlights against the clouds. So we could see a little bit. But then the searchlights went off, and we were in the darkness. Pretty soon I smelled the overpowering smell of garlic. Now garlic is what the Chinese had in their ration bags, And oh Lord, and my new replacement, the BAR man, was to my right, but I didn't dare move to get to him because they were right on us. They were in a matter of yards of us. And we all sat very quiet. And then I could hear them chopping the frozen ground, and they set up a mortar. Pretty soon I hear that round sliding down the tube. And they were shelling our main line, And I said, I hope that nobody fires because we're too close. And luckily nobody did. Everybody kept their cool. And then here comes from the main line, "Get the hell out of there." And we snuck out of there very quietly. And then there was a slit trench there. And my radio man fell into that slit trench. and he had that SCR 300 radio on his back, and he got wedged in the trench. And Lord, me and two other guys were fighting to get him out of there. And then we could hear those Chinese running towards us, And we finally jerked them out of that trench and took off for the main line. And I told my BAR man, fire a few bursts in their general direction, to slow them up. He did. And we made it to the main line, hollered like hell so our own machine gunners wouldn't kill us. And there we were back on safety on the main line. And by that time, our machine guns opened up on those pursuing Chinese, and the whole work lost interest in us, and they went back wherever they came from. But that was just one incident. So here we are. Chinese are back in force. American casualties are starting to get heavy.
Could I ask you one question? Is this near the 38th parallel?
This is right, was practically just a little bit above it. Just because the war started and ended on the 38th, roughly. And, then at that point I was back from the hospital in Japan. And while I was in Japan, there was rumors that they were going to move out the 1st Cavalry Division to bring them back to Japan because, like I said, the Russians had designs on the island of Hokkaido. And they had one division there, and they needed another one. So, we went back to Japan. I went on the advance party because I had all my shots.
You're going back to Japan and Hokkaido. That's the northernmost island, kind of near Russia.
Well, the Russians had the cruel islands, They were Japanese before the war, but the Russians claimed them as a prize of war, They entered the war in the last days, of it. But anyway, I got on that advance party and we went to Japan. And while we were in Japan, the advance party, the main body was still in Korea. They decided that they were going to replace us with the 45th Oklahoma National Guard, which was on Hokkaido. So, so we went to the 45th there, told them a few war stories, and moved them out to Japan, to Korea. And here comes the main body out of Korea. They arrived in, I think, around the 1st of January. And our battalion commander called us all into the auditorium there, the movie theater was. And he said, "You boys think you're here for a picnic. I got news for you. We're here to train." And Lord, did we ever train. They issued us skis and snowshoes. And it was safe to say that 85% of the troops had never been on skis or snowshoes before. And on a night problem, had besides. Can you imagine the disaster that was? And we had to march in step with those damn snowshoes. Oh, Lord. Anyway, inside of a couple of weeks, the troops got accustomed to them, and they could march in them. So, Russians are watching us from the cruel islands. We're watching the Russians. Here would come. We were full loads of ammunition at all times. We slept in the barracks with machine guns with belts in them, ready to go. But we were only in the barracks about 1 week a month. The rest of the time we were in the woods. And one thing I learned from that, and I still remember, 31 feet of packed snow will stop an M1 bullet, which is a .30-06, So we go out in the woods there. Luckily, Hokkaido had a lot of snow, but it wasn't too cold. About the same climate as the Alaska Panhandle, So we were watching the Russians. They were watching us. Good time was had by all. Then the Russian MiGs would come and hit our airspace. They'd go right up in the air. Our F-86 Sabres would come, hit that same spot, go right up in the air. And one day, a Russian MiG got too far, and he crashed to the side of a mountain. So the Russians asked us if we would help them retrieve the bodies, pilot and radio operator. So we had to chop our way through a bamboo forest, thick as hair on a dog. Took a damn near a week to get to that plane. Couldn't use a helicopter on account of the bamboo. To retrieve the bodies, Russians sent us a letter, thank you, And shortly after, an American plane ditched there and fell into Soviet waters. They helped us. The pilot was killed. They helped us retrieve the body, brought him back to us. We sent him a letter, thank you, you know. And basically, that was about the extent we had with the Russians. They were there and we were here. That's what it amounted to. And then one happy day, after training all into the spring, early summer months, word came down, saddle up, you're going back to Korea. Nobody was too happy about that. And I will say one thing, though. Church attendance increased considerably at that point. Okay. We went out, we loaded on a troop transport and went out to sea. Next morning, we woke up, and from horizon to horizon was American ships. I mean, all kinds of ships. Aircraft carriers, battleships, destroyers, cruisers, transports. And they were going to make a fake landing at the North Korean port of Hungnam to try to draw the Chinese Air Force out. And we're waiting in ambush for them. Chinese were too smart for that. They didn't come out. So we cruised down the eastern coast of Korea and got about 50 miles from the line. And then they said we got to keep the South Korean army on the line because they were threatening to bug out, you know. So, okay, we landed there. All the local farmers were standing on the beach wondering what is going on, you know. We went up into the hills for the night, dug in. Next morning, back down to the transports, loaded up, and this is with those rope nets, you know. And the sea is running heavy. Is that ever fun? So we landed in Busan then. They unloaded us, assigned my battalion to Daegu. And there was those communist guerrillas were down there, and we were supposed to chase those guerrillas. Well, at this point, I was in the military police already. So we went and chased guerrillas, and I might add, those same guerrillas that are blowing up trains at night were the friendliest farmers you ever saw in the daytime. Hey, Joe! But we never caught no guerrillas. But to go from our camp, which was Camp Walker, to the main PX in Daegu, you had to have armed escorts. Deuce and a half truck with a 50 caliber machine gun, the Jeep with 30 calibers, to get just the necessities from the PX. And this went on for some time. Then they decided to move the MP company I was with north. So they loaded us up on a troop train full of Canadians. Canadians are going up to join their unit in the Commonwealth Division. So, but they didn't give us no weapons, except the 45s we carried, you know. Well, the Canadians thought that was terrible. And then one sergeant says, do you understand the workings of a British rifle? I do, because I was a gun nut from home, you know. So he issued each of us a British rifle, 2 bandoliers of ammunition. And we went north. Every third car was a flat car, sandbagged, and a South Korean machine gun crew on there. Luckily, we went through the night without no incident and got to our next duty assignment. And in there, it was mostly taking care of Chinese prisoners, you know, because that first push of theirs, I mean, they lost an awful lot of prisoners because they were sick of fighting. They just surrendered en masse, you know. So MPs had to escort those prisoners down the track by trains south to Busan, and there they put them on one of those offshore islands where they couldn't do no harm, you know. Kokott was one of them, I forget the other one. And, well, that was our main duties. And then one day, the first sergeant calls me in the office, says, Kokott, he says, you got your points. He said, you can rotate. I said, thank God. So, I had the necessary points to go home on. So, boarded the ferry again at Busan, went to Japan, and they said it was the 7th of December. Don't worry, troops, we'll be home in plenty of time for Christmas. Yeah. We boarded the General Brewster, which was a new modern troop ship built during the last days of the Second World War, and took off for San Francisco. A ship that could have crossed the Pacific in 9 days. We were dawdling along. It took us 14 days. So you know what it was? It was the 21st of December already, practically Christmas Eve. And they diddled around some more, and they said, we're going to fly you to Fort Atterbury, Indiana. Then you'll be in range of home. Yeah, they didn't, though. They put us on a troop train, which was sidetracked most of the time to let the regular trains go too. It took us to Fort Carson, Colorado. We arrived there on Christmas Eve, December 24th, about noon. Then they moved fast. Boy, they processed us, paid us, gave the usual physical inspections, and, okay, troops, take off, you're on your own. Try to get transportation on Christmas Eve, huh? Even back in 1952. So a bunch of us enterprising young fellers, we chartered a bus, a Trailways bus, driver and all, and he's going to take us to Minneapolis. And away we went. Well, we changed drivers in Omaha, Nebraska, and when it got daylight about 10 o'clock or so, we were in Windham, Minnesota, and there was one restaurant open in town being Christmas Day. An older lady was running that restaurant she had a high school girl helping her. And she had 2 turkeys roasted. She said, thank God I roasted 2 of them. Because we ate her out of house and home. There was 39 of us, plus the driver, you know. She didn't even have a bag of potato chips when we left. So away we went again. We got to Minneapolis about 5 o'clock, a little before maybe. And Ralph Johnson, I said, Ralph, you get the baggage.
He's from Whitehall here. Ralph Johnson?
From Whitehall, yes. He'll see me a couple of times here. And anyway, I said, you get the baggage and I'll get the tickets. There was a Greyhound going south, just at the right time. We boarded that Greyhound. I said, I'm getting off in Winona. Ralph thought La Crosse was closer. I said, it is not. But anyway, I got off in Winona, hired a taxi. He took me home to Trout Run. I was so happy to be home. I tipped him generously, and my family was waiting for me. Anyway.
It was a pretty emotional time, wasn't it?
Anyway, my mother and my sisters were crying, and Dad had tears in his eyes. I said, people, your son has returned. So, okay. I went to visit my grandparents the next day, and pretty soon the 30-day leave was over with. I met Ralph Johnson in Arcadia. I said, Ralph, you going to travel with me? Nope. He said, I'm not going back. I said, well, they'll come and get you. No, they won't, he said. Give me a manure fork and put me on a farm, he said. And I'll be happy. I said, they don't look at it that way. So anyway, I left. I met a guy from my outfit from Duluth, Minnesota. He was traveling to Fort Carson also, so we traveled together. Got to Fort Carson, no Ralph. 1 day goes by, no Ralph. 2 days go by, no Ralph. I said, the MPs are going after him. 3 days went by, and here comes Ralph. Just under the wire, because they gave you 3 days grace, you know. So, the rest of us, they sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, which was a good duty post. And Ralph, since I think because he was AWOL a little bit, they sent him to Camp Olin, California, in the Mojave Desert. Ralph said it was so damn hot, he said, you could fry an egg on a tank. Turn in the middle of the day. And as at Fort Riley, they put me in the Army General School. And we were training reserve officers. We started out with a class of about 144. And when we graduated them, when they got to lieutenant's bars, there was about 40. We all congratulated them and saluted them, the school troops. And we did it all summer. And then in the fall, they decided to put us in a different kind of a training. Interrogation of prisoners of war. So we had to play the part of prisoner, some of them, and the other ones had to get the information out of them. And we had a skit, a program which we followed. It was based on World War II in France. And I was in that until they discharged me in March. And I went home and I said, thank God I'm home. That's about it.
Boy, oh boy, this is something else. I've never heard a war story like this before. I got to ask you a couple of questions if you don't mind. You got, in your first tour of duty there in Korea, you got wounded, and you said by a grenade. Now, when you get wounded by a grenade, you're very close to the enemy. About how close were you?
Within that window out there. I saw that brown arm come out of that trench, and I saw that grenade coming through the air. And there was a Russian grenade, so very unreliable fuses. Well, it might go off in 1 second or 3 seconds, who knows? And I spun around, but I didn't want to get caught in the face, and that damn thing went off right behind me.
Well, where did it go off?
On the ground. It blew the heel off of my boot. And, like I said, the sergeant next to me lost an eye, and I was liberally peppered with shrapnel. And I told you, I had a hole in my back big you could stick a fist into. And when the medic patched me up, he said, if you can walk, get the hell out of here. Because the fighting was horrendous. But we broke their back, the Chinese. The 2 cavalry regiments failed, but they had them softened up for us, I guess. And we took that line.
Well, how do you even cope with that? I mean, mentally and psychologically, how do you cope with it? I mean,
I tell you what bothered me more than anything is the loss of my friends. And I felt sorry for those poor Chinese soldiers. They were kids, most of them. 13, 14, 15 years old. And, of course, they had the ruthless commissars ordering them around, A few Russian advisors mixed in the match. But I felt sorry for those poor kids. They had their whole lives in front of them.
But I got to ask you again on this guy that threw that grenade. How did he get that close without getting shot?
Plenty of men got shot. This was a charge. We crawled up that vertical hill, and the first line we took, there was like an outpost for him. The second line was a tough one. And we charged because you couldn't stay still for a moment. We charged that trench line. And I got fairly close to that trench. I was expecting to get shot any moment, But we made it. And then that damn grenade comes out and knocks me out of the war. And that Portuguese fella I was telling you about, he was close enough to throw that satchel charge into that bunker. And like I said, when that went off, Lord help us, there were body parts, bodies, logs, weapons, everything was flying in the air.
He should have got a big award for that. He saved a lot of people.
As far as I was concerned, he should have got the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
But they gave him a Silver Star, put him in for the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second one. And, well, then from then on there was enough momentum there. We cleaned out that trench line, and the third trenches, they fled. They ran for their lives.
How do you cope with the fear? You must have under circumstances like that, there must be extreme fear.
In battle, you reach a point where you're keyed up. You wouldn't think of killing a fellow human being, but you're relish killing him. It's a kind of I don't know what you'd call it, claustrophobic experience or what. I don't know, but.
So how long a period of time were you in the totally in the service, and what year did you get out?
I went in 1951, in March, and I got out in 1954, also in March. I was a couple of weeks over 3 years,
Well, I think if I remember right, 1954 is about when the truce was being negotiated on the 38th parallel in Panmunjom.
They were arguing about the size of the conference table.
I know I happened to be in the Army at that time, so I remember that it was a truce going on, but it was a long truce, it seems like.
Well, they argued for about 2 years, discussing that. And those North Korean negotiators were just a bunch of bastards. I mean, the Chinese were more lenient. You know what I mean? Of course, it wasn't their country that was being invaded either. Well, it was their country at one point. I don't know why MacArthur let those guys cross that Yalu River. And he was still in command in those days, And Harry Truman got in a fight with him and fired him. Brought MacArthur back in disgrace, supposedly. And he was treated like a hero. When his plane stopped in Hawaii, well, everybody was there to greet him. And the United States, holy fright. They were going to even run him for president.
I remember him giving an address, I think it was to the Congress when he got back, General MacArthur.
MacArthur was an old-line military man, He fought the war to win it. And Truman was the Korean War. He fought it to contain the North Koreans. Well, he didn't want to win the war. But what about all those poor American men killed? And the war ended about where it started on the 38th parallel.
Yeah, it ended the same place it started, and it's still being protected by American troops there.
37,000 troops there right now. 2nd Division.
Well, Joe, this has been some program. What did you do after you got home from the Army? After you got discharged, did you work somewhere or?
After I got discharged, I helped Dad on the farm for 2 years. Then I went to school, and I was at school exactly 1 semester, and I got involved in a car accident, and I was all banged up.
When you say school, is that?
Well, I know, in college, and then. After I had 1 semester, and I had to quit college because I had a horrendous hospital bill, and I had to work that hospital bill off. So I went to work for Abel and Bach. That was a company out of Milwaukee that built a factory in Arcadia, And I guess I was fairly intelligent because they promoted me right away to. First I was a purchasing agent, then I was traffic manager, and I always had an office job, So I didn't have to work on a line or anything like that.
Well, I can tell just by talking with you, your age, and now you must be in the neighborhood of 85 or so?
86.
86?
87 in March.
You've got a real good memory. You've got an exceptionally good memory.
That's one thing I'm blessed with. They say that here, too, in this institution.
Well, I think we've had an outstanding show. It gives us a little... We got a hero that we're speaking to today. He's a hero. He's a guy that's contributed a lot. Not too many people know about our heroes. They're walking the streets, of our towns, and a lot of them are gone. So we want to thank you very much for your interview today, Joe. Joe Kokott. He's from Trout Run down south of Arcadia toward the Dodge area. And you have something else to add?
Well, I just want to thank you, Olin, for this interview. And I always say I did the best I could as far as the military went, It
sounds like you did an exceptional job, and we appreciate it. Ron Henry is filming today, and we appreciate him filming the show, and we want to thank you for all your service, and we want to wish you the best of luck for the future. And we thank you very much. And
well, thank you too, like I said, and Ron. And I wish I was as young and frisky as I was in those days.
Well, you're mentally frisky. I'll have to say that, Joe. Joe Kokott. And we'll see you on the next Discover Trempealeau County show real soon.